What's good, everybody? It's your boy Hamza, and today, guys, I'm coming to you with a brand new video. But before we get into that, guys, please go ahead and leave a like on this video. Let's try and get 3 likes on this video. We've been doing a great job, so let's keep it up. And of course, subscribe, guys, because we are less than 200 subscribers away from 7,000. Once we hit it, I will be doing a giveaway. I'm gonna announce the giveaway very soon. Anyways, guys, check all the links down below. Hit the notification bell, and without further ado, let's get right into this video. All right, guys, so now we are getting into the video. So the video, if you guys did not see by the title, it's going to be a tier list for the best decks post Age of. I'll try and go a little bit in depth of the decks and why I have my reasoning for it. And then if you guys have any other options or any other comments, you guys can leave them down below. Try my best to respond to each and every single one of your guys' comments. So leave a like before we start, guys. And without further ado, guys, the first deck we are going to be talking about is going to be Floowandreeze. Now, Flunder is a weird deck because it's always kind of reliant on what's going on in the metagame. Like, is it a good matchup? Is it not? Because Flunder is a deck that you can take to an event and sure, you might be able to top, but its consistency issues are one of the main reasons. Now, you're probably like, oh, what do you mean? Like, they have all these cards like Prosperity, Extravagance. Yes, they play those cards to avoid bricking. So think about that, right? I'm going to go ahead and put Flunder in a contender right now just because, again, it depends on the meta. So putting it in the meta tab off rip is not going to be a thing. So it'll be contender and I'll move it along, kind of depending. The next deck here we got is Rikka Sunavalon, like Rikka plants. Now, again, if we are in the EU, of course it's gonna be meta. It's gonna be the best deck. Like, I don't know what goes on in EU. Like, they're just like a crazy breeding ground of like all sorts of nonsense. Of course the players are very good, but Rikka Sunavalon, I would say it's a contender for sure. You know, it's won a couple YCSs in the past. I feel like the duelists who know it very well. So maybe that could just be a thing where if you're really good at the deck, you might be able to succeed. Me personally, I have tested it. I just feel like in terms of a combo deck, they're just better cards to play, but I mean, to each your own. So I'm just going to put Rikka here for now. Of course, this will shift depending on how I feel. So moving on into the next one is going to be TG. So now TG is getting a bunch of support. They're getting the Synchro Monsters. They're getting TG Rocket Salamander as well, who works very well with the Duel stars. The only issue I have with TG is that there are better combo decks that do what it does, that end on better boards as well and play through hand traps better as well. I would say that this is going to be in the Pretenders. Yeah, I would say Pretenders, and actually mid and decent needs to be up. So there you go. So I would put Pretenders. Yeah, I would put this as a pretender. So meaning that you can play this deck, you might be able to see some local success, but in terms of like regionals, kind of bigger events, in that regard, I don't think it'll be able to perform just because certain combo decks are very limited by what they do, and there are better combo decks that can do it better, like I said before. I might do a TG deck profile, of course, so I might be talking about the ins and outs of the deck, but in my testing, it didn't really feel much. But now this is going to be probably the most anticipated deck going into Age of Overlord. Now, I'm sure you guys know it's going to be Rescue Ace. So I'm gonna put Rescue Ace off meta. Me personally, I don't think that this is going to be the be-all end-all. This is going to be the best deck. I think that the Duel star engine adds a lot of consistency to it. It helps it do all sorts of other nasty combos as well, while getting Hydrant, while getting Turbulence, playing around hand traps, things of that nature. Of course, you're not really locked into like your Rescue Ace, or your Hydrant getting interrupted. It's not a choke point anymore. Airlifter, emergency, you have Duel star who literally floats into this card or gets the card no matter what. So again, it's a 1.5 card combo that ends on it. So this is probably going to be a top 3 deck of the format. It's not gonna be the best, don't get me wrong. It still loses to a little bit interesting cards, you know, but it just depends on how good the Rescue Ace player is, how they manage their resources, things of that nature. But again, I mean, this deck can make Dwellers, so that's something to look out for. But then moving on, guys, to the next, I'm going to be talking about Runick. More specifically, I'm going to be talking about Runick Spright, or just like pure Runick. I think that this is a pretender deck for sure. If we're talking about Runick Spright, or sorry, not Runick Spright, just pure Runick Stun. I think Runick Spright is mid to decent, but I think the Runick engine itself just isn't as good anymore, honestly. And Runick fans can hate on me for whatever they want, but personally, I don't think Runick is a good deck anymore. I think that you need to pair it with something. The stun variants of decks are kind of out the meta. They're just like Evenleys, we got Lightning Storms, we got Feather Dust or Cyclones. There's so many decks. If you're gonna play Runick or like a stun variant, there's just better options to play. The next one I have to do is going to be the structure decks with the Red Dragon Archfiend. I think this is a pretender deck as well. I think it's really close to being mid to decent. Soul Resonator, Bone Archfiend, and the other guy, I can't remember his name, like Mud Resonator or whatever his name is. He's really good. So like the Bone Archfiend is like normal, add 1. Soul Resonator and then the other super or foil card are really good in that deck. So that's a deck that I would definitely say to watch out for. I would say it's like this, definitely, yeah. So TG might be here actually. So Yeah, so I would say it's a pretender deck. It's close, of course. And then another highly anticipated deck is going to be Manadome or Manadium. So I do have combos of this deck coming out very soon. And I'm sure you guys have been seeing what Triff Gaming has been doing. He's been going absolutely crazy on DB and regional. So Manadome, I would say it's a contender for sure. I believe that it's very similar to Infernoble in the fact that it has all sorts of combo lines to play. It can play a lot of other cards as well. I would say it's a for sure contender, especially when they get Samsara and Trillo Scuda. I'm gonna be having the cards like pop up over here or something. So Samsara and Trillo Scuda, those cards are really good. I hope that's not the way you pronounce that thing, because that card just doesn't sound like a real card. But Samsara and Trillo Scuda enabling like a lot of one card combos and enabling it to just be really powerful in that regard is really good. Plus it's a Chad with the sword, so why would you not want to play this deck? And then moving on, we got Infernoble again. This isn't even a bias. Everyone knows that Infernoble and Manadium are like one of those decks that can just come out of nowhere and slap you. I'm going to put Infernoble here. I'm going to put Manadium here. In testing, I do believe that Infernoble is better than Manadium, kind of in game ones, because when you go second, the Infernoble go second is essentially better. Now, again, you guys can say whatever you want, like, oh my god, when I play Manadium and I have this hand, this and that, whatever, whatever. In a vacuum of infinite test hands, I've literally always felt like Infernoble is better going second. Manadium does have the go first on it because it can kind of end up with like the counter trap, things of that nature, but I do believe that Infernoble is better going first. It can play through hand traps, especially a good pilot on Infernoble can kind of maximize its resources, so I believe that's a contender. Moving on to another deck, and this is a deck that a lot of people have been talking about with Droll and Arizer leaving the format. It's going to be Dark World. So initially I had Dark World in the contender because I felt like, you know what, you should kind of worry about Dark World, you should kind of be afraid, but I'm gonna put it in mid to decent. Now the reason for that is because the format is going to be like Dueler Turbo essentially. So again, this deck gets hit by Dueler Turbo. This deck also gets hit by combo hit cards like Droll and Lockbird. So again, like I said before, if people are anticipating the combo matchups, so Infernoble, Manadium, things of that nature, Sunavalon, Dragon Link, if they are anticipating that, they will be putting Droll and Lockbird, so it hurts your deck. On top of that, a lot of people will be going Dueler turn 1. Rescuers can do it. A bunch of other decks can do it that I'm going to talk about later on. So and it loses to Bishop. Well, quote unquote lose to Bishop, but I mean there's so much hate for the deck. I do think that if you go first and you hand loop your opponent, especially with Ken and Jen, put them on board. Shadow Ken and Gen are very powerful, and I think that this deck is one of the only decks that can abuse that little engine, and that engine is just ready to just be absolutely broken. Like, you don't need to use your normal summon, and you can already force your opponent to technically rip cards from your hand, and you know, like Silvas, golds, like not even that, like rainbows, brows, all the other cards have really good kind of effects when they resolve, so you end up looping your opponent for a lot more as well. So again, it's one of those decks that can really manipulate it. And then going on to another deck, it is going to be Dragon Link. Now I do believe Dragon Link is going to be a contender, if not mid to decent, but I mean Dragon Link is always a deck that kind of depends on the meta, so I'm gonna put a contender for now. I'm probably gonna put it like this. So I think Rikka Sunavalon is gonna be the worst, I think. Yeah, so out of the contenders, of course, still a good deck. But speaking on Dragon Link is really good. So again, like I said before, depending on the format, Dragon Link gets better because it already main decks Bestials, but I think that just Magnemite and Chaos Space getting hit kind of do overall hit the kind of consistency of the deck, but it still is a very powerful deck. So being able to go mid-range and kind of control non-targeting removal, it's really good in that regard. Honestly, one Magma is all you need really, and the Bestials are just absolutely broken as well. So again, Lubellion should have been hit. Also they should have been multiple hits. This is just a deck that just keeps on giving, so Dragon Link is going to be in the contender category. So moving on to the next deck, it is going to be Chimera, or as like I'm only going to call it branded Chimera. I don't think you should be playing branded personally. I think if you have the branded cards, you should be playing branded Chimera. If there was branded, I would put like branded, let's say I'll put it mid to decent, where like everybody's on Ash Blossom now. The branded engine just isn't as powerful as the Chimera engine, so I'll put Chimera in meta. And the reason why I say Chimera in meta is, yes, the deck is very powerful as it is, like, you know, being able to set up super poly targets, being able to set up poly guarding Chimera Turbo, things of that nature. The deck is very powerful, very resilient as well, sets up very annoying cards. But they're also getting the new fusion guy. I don't remember his name. I think he's a Baphomet. He has the ability where he can banish and special summon, so he's really good because now you have other ways of getting out your Wanghu. Squiddy just made a video on it, and Squiddy was talking about how they can summon End of Anubis, so it's like a walking talking Necro Valley. So I think that because of that, this deck just gets already, this deck was already good, and now it just gets another power boost, so it becomes a lot better as well. So I'm probably gonna put 5 decks up here in the meta, honestly, but this is going to be a very powerful deck in the meta game. The next deck is going to be Spright. So again, you can do Runick Spright, you can do regular Spright, you can do Adventure Spright, you can go for higher Runick, whatever. I think that Spright itself is mid to decent. I think in terms of combo decks, again, like I said before, there are better options to play. It still has the power level to be a contender. I'm gonna say it's above mid to decent. If there was a middle ground, I'll put Spright in the middle ground, but I think that Spright would be a decent kind of choice to do. I think it's really close to being good, but it's in one of those weird sorceral areas where it's like it's a really good deck, but it's not really good deck, you know what I mean? So I think Spright is perfectly fine like that. Spright also gets hit by the other combo cards also, so I mean, whatever. Then moving on, we are going to be talking about the Furhire. So again, this can be Runick Furhire. It's probably going to be Runick Furhire. I would say Runick Furhire is a pretender deck. It is close, but again, it's just very difficult to kind of justify playing these decks when you have all sorts of other decks that kind of are mid-range decks but have better top end and the ceiling and the floor or whatever. So I think that I would put Furhires in pretenders. Then moving on, we are going to be talking about Labrynth. So I'm probably gonna put Labrynth in meta because so I have an aggro video coming out that's going to be like a breakdown of each of the new cards. So Arius is really good in what what Arius provides. Basically what Arius is it's like multiple copies of Kuklok. You can actually max out on this card and just kind of get infinite value. So I think Labrynth gets the bump. I don't know if it would be meta, honestly. We're going to decide when kind of like my other cards come into the meta game or when I start talking about the other decks. But for now, I'm going to put Arius in meta, probably bottom end of meta, top end of contenders. It just goes representation. Purrely, like, do I even need to say more? Purrely is probably going to be here, in my opinion. I think Purrely will be worse than Rescue Ace, better than Chimera, and better than Labrynth deck. But so that's Purrely. I mean, Purrely is just really good in what it does, like being small little cards, being engined, being able to discard. It can also use Gen and Ken in its engine as well because it's not really using its normal summon too much because all the spell cards are literally E-Tellies. This deck needs to get more of a hit as well because deck cards like evenly matched board breakers, they don't really do well against Purrely. It forces you to almost change your game and have outs to unoutable monsters, kind of similar to a Rise Card. So I feel like it's an unfair deck, but I mean, we'll just see. So that's it for that. And then Salamangreat, I would say it's a mid to decent deck. I think it's not bad in what it does, but I think, like I said before, the reason I'm scaling these decks is if there's a better combo deck, the deck is going to be worse than the combo decks. If it's a better mid-range deck, I would say it's above or worse. So I think Salad is a worse mid-range deck than the other decks that we've seen. Notice that there's the mid-range decks I'm talking about are going to be like Rescue Ace and Purrely, which Salad is just much worse than, in my opinion. But I mean, it still is a good deck. But yeah, moving on, Scareclaw. Now Scareclaw, I would say it's pretty close. I would say it's a mid to decent deck, honestly. Twin Saw is crazy. It's literally an FTK card, and then being able to end on like the dude who makes everyone into defense, and then unaffected is really good as well. So I'd say Scareclaw is good. I mean, in Master Duel just came out as well. I think Scareclaw Manadium is pretty legit, honestly, when you play like a 60 card pile. But Scareclaw by itself, I would put in mid to decent. And then talking about Tearlament next, I would put Tearlament in the meta for sure. I would probably do this. So I'll do Tearlament third. Tearlament doesn't get a buff in Agov. I mean, they do get the Horus cards. In my opinion, you shouldn't be playing them. They're okay. My little brother plays a lot of Tearlament. He was telling me as well that Horus cards are just okay. They're not that good, and they're really bad mills. You want to open them. The main things are Steady and Happy, but again, like I said before, I'm not going to leak too much thoughts because I want to talk about it in my post-Agov video. But again, Steady and Happy are really good, but it forces you to play a little bit. Being able to mill some cards is pretty nice, but if you're on the assumption that everybody's going to be playing these type of decks, and you go Zombie Vampire mill 4 and you mill your opponent's 4, and then it's like Agito Kelbeck Shufflers, and then you're in just an infinite toxic chain reaction of just destruction. So I'll put Tier in the third best deck. Moving on, we are going to be talking about Vanquish Soul or Virtual Soul. I would say Virtual Soul or Vanquish Soul, sorry, is a contender. I would definitely say it's a really good contender because it can play hand traps. The only issue is if you don't get to Raisin, you're screwed. You live and die off of Raisin. I really want to put it mid to decent around Salamangreat, but I think that's disrespecting Vanquish Soul. I think a good duelist can take it far. I think good deck building rewards Vanquish Soul as well. So I'm just going to put it in contender. I don't want to hate on Vanquish Soul too much because I think Raisin's sick. He looks like Kawaki from Boruto, so there's that. And then moving on to the final deck before I make my arrangements, it is going to be Unchained. And I think Unchained is going to be the be-all, end-all, kind of the best deck of the format just because nothing really changes in that regard. That's to say Rescue Ace is going to be the second best. Matter of fact, I'll move Tier up. So Unchained is really good because, again, untouched. It's a mid-range deck, like I was saying before, but it's a very powerful mid-range deck. It constantly loops. It doesn't go infinite, but it can go past like turn 6 and 7 with its resource loop, so it's really good as well. The only issue is it does lose to Abyss Dweller, which Tearlament and Rescue Ace can both make. So that's just an argument to be had, like, oh, maybe it's going to be like this because you don't want to get blind Dweller. But again, Tier and Unchained lose to Dweller, and Hydrant.deck can make Abyss Dweller, so technically you want to put Hydrant deck first. Personally, looking at the top 5, I would definitely put Labrynth to contenders. I would think about putting Chimera branded-ish 2 contenders as well, but I don't really know. I think just leaving it in meta is going to be perfectly fine personally. So again, just a quick breakdown. The meta for post Agov is going to be Rescue Ace, Unchained, Tearlament. I think those are going to be the top 3 decks without a doubt. I think Purrely and Branded Chimera will be the top 5 decks. Top 3 is definitely going to be these 3. Tearlament, again, it has a soft spot in a lot of players' hearts, so I think Tearlament will be there. And then for the contenders, at the top end of contenders, we have Labrynth, Flu, and then we have Infernoble and Manadium. Now again, they're contenders for a reason, right? It's not like they're they're bad. It's not like they're rogue decks. They're contenders, meaning that they have the ability to actually go against the meta decks and actually win. A lot of people are actually afraid of all these contenders, so again, be ready for that. I believe that Magnamon.deck or Dragon Link is very good because the Bestials play well into Tearlament. They also play well into Unchained, so again, it's pretty good. I think they play well into Branded Chimera. I'm not too sure about that. I haven't tested too much, but again, depending on how played these decks are, Bestials will come into play. But you guys can see what I mean, right? So, and then we have the Rikka Sunavalon. I'll put that at the back. Honestly, I don't believe in this deck at all, but I have to do it justice. And then we have Raisin deck or Vanquish Soul or Kawaki deck. So again, I do think this is good. I think, who knows, depending on the way the meta shapes, this could eke into first or into the meta category. It's just difficult because it lives and dies off of getting into Raisin. If they don't get Raisin, their boards absolutely suck. Then into mid and decent, we got Salamangreat, we got Spright, we got Darkwood, we got Scareclaw. So again, pretty good. And then Pretenders, aka Don't Bother, is going to be Red Dragon Archfiend, TG deck, Runick deck, for hire deck. So again, guys, that was it for my tier list. If you guys have any questions, if you disagree with my tier list, comment down below. If you agree, leave a like, sub. Of course, guys, we're trying to 7,000 subscribers. We're really close to it, guys, so keep it up, guys. And my name's Hamza, and like I always say, keep on shining, never on your dreams. Peace.